The female incense guest secretly lifted the quilt and stood up to disturb the little monk's heart. The moment she climbed through the Buddha statue, she also passed the precepts of her boudoir that had been burying for 10 years. After that, they often went to the back mountain to tear the paintings and even beat and scolded the beauties in front of the old monk. It was not until the two of them ran out for a meal that night. After that, they were so tired that they hugged each other and fell asleep on the boat. Only then did the Lao and Shang realize their personal relationship. She didn't make a sound but threw a big cock onto the boat, pulled the boat to the shore with the rope tied to the chicken's feet, and then she pulled the wooden plug on the boat and let the cold lake wake up the sleeping two who were sleeping. When they suddenly woke up, they hurriedly shook the water out of their shoes. The little monk, who knew his mistake, knelt in front of his master and father and kept apologizing for his sins. However, the old monk did not blame him, but wanted to drive the girl's villager out of the temple. No matter how hard the little monk was, he could not change the fate of the girl's villager being sent away. This night, the little monk knelt in front of the Buddha statue for a long time. He couldn't stay and left. He tossed and turned every night and could not go to bed. Finally, he was so itchy that he stole the Buddha statue in the temple and silently chased the girl's hometown guest, but didn't know that his master and father had already known everything. But it was not stopped, because he had already seen that Xiao Mushang's annoyance had not been eliminated. Xiao Mushang lived with him since he was a child in the Temple of Fox Star. The water flows around him separated the world outside the temple. Only when his master went out did Xiao Mushang have the opportunity to play a little. The old man was about to go out, and the little man followed up, shouting to go to collect herbs and medicine. The estimated Fox Star Xiaozi added a lot of fun because of this young and lively child. He was the wonder of the land and also the spring itself. The dream is full of fresh greenness, and where his eyes fall is the most familiar temple. Pingrili Temple is a brick and tiles. It looks so big compared to the small lake. Now the temple is a little bit by bit. Compared with the big lake, it seems that the scenery that rises in front of the eyes is like a seed. The little monk is buried in the heart of the little monk. Soon the master and the disciple finished their own affairs. The little monk and the monk are on the boat on the way back. The little monk and the empty road are each constantly getting excited. He asked for praise and said that he had picked a large pile of herbs, but Xiao and Shang Wanwan didn't expect it. The herbs he picked himself up were mixed with poison. Xiao Mushang was very confused. These herbs looked exactly the same old. The monk patiently taught him how to get closer, and you would find a white line at the bottom of the poisonous herbs. This conversation seemed to be talking about herbs. In fact, there was often only a difficult line that was easy to detect, but clearly existed. Lao Mushang had a clear mind and a bright mind. Xiao Mushang could not tell the difference between the two. People have formed a clear contrast with younger monks who are younger than. This sparse and ordinary conversation will become the storm of his destiny. The wind is like a small stone placed in the water. It quickly dissipates with the shallow clothes. 4 seconds of clearing the river. Chasing dogs, fighting fish, rowing, climbing trees, sweating under the fog. The years and beautiful days in the mountains seem to never end. All troubles are blocked outside the narrow wooden door. This day he rode again through the lake, climbing up the slope and walking around the twisted rocks. Can find another world. Stream. The forest sent into the whole winter, and the little fish swayed its tail and swam leisurely in the clear water. The little monk grabbed the fish, tied a stone on him, and then grabbed a green frog. He wrapped it with a thread and connected it with the stone. Even the little snake passing by would be caught by it. It would also tie it with the stone. The little fish was taken into the water by the stone, because the stone could only struggle and jump. The little snake pulled the stone and walked forward with difficulty. Xiao monk. The broken teeth were so happy. But all this was seen by the old monk, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he hugged a big stone and left silently. After waiting for the late night, he quietly tied the big stone to Xiao Mushang's body. The next day, Xiao Mushang asked his master's father to help untickle the rope. However, the master who had always spoiled him suddenly became strict. He scolded Xiao Mushang for his behavior yesterday and asked him to find the animals and untied the rope for them. After all, he would naturally untickle the rope for him. Xiao Mushang took a hard time and ran into the mountains and forests. After searching all the way, I found that only the frog eyes were thin. The fish and snake were dead. The death of the snake is particularly miserable. The blood from the wood is seeping into the mud and soil. It is not difficult to imagine that every step he crawled before his death was suffering from the pain of star-chasing accident. Seeing this scene, Xiao Mushang could no longer bear Hao Hao Tuo and started crying. Lao Mushang stood in a high place and quietly watched the heartbroken child with thoughts in his eyes. In the end, he only sighed that Lao Mushang once said that if those animals died, then your future life would be born in your heart. This stone is hard to eliminate once the evil is born by the torture that a person's life has opened up unconsciously. In the tears that the young monk still cannot stop, spring ends. There will be many springs in the world. There are only one spring that can be swallowed away the real dream of the childhood. Little monk grows up as a young man. His legs open the door to welcome the summer. The lake water surges. The trees and cicadas sing. The stove is hot, and the shadows follow him. He is no longer an uneasy child staring at the snake wrapped around the grass and buying it. His heart is in his heart. A thrill of excitement that had never been seen before hit his erect heart. When she saw the young girl who came from afar, she reached the peak. It turned out that she was here to pick her up. Like in the secluded years, she climbed up the mountain slope again and stood by the Buddha to look far away. This time her eyes fell on the road, which was the way to go to the temple and the way to come from the red dust. Invisible, her world became bigger and round, and she noticed that two people came to the road. The mother, who was tired and looked very tired, was also a guest of the temple. Her mother was worried and looked unsatisfied, and her daughter's face was pale and she kept coughing. Their purpose of coming to the temple was also very simple, and she prayed for the young girl's body. On the boat, my mother envied the health of the young man. Looking at the sick and weak girl in front of her, she couldn't help but point to the ancient tree and said, "You will definitely be healthy like this tree that has lived for 300 years. This is comfort, blessing, and even a school that has lost its heart." From this sentence, the young man's vague love words had concrete look. And then the old man received the mother and daughter and took them to send scriptures to pray for blessings. Late at night, my mother was still kneeling down on the silent journey. The young girl lay weakly on the ground. She closed her eyes tightly, her face was bloodless, and her forehead was covered with dense cold sweat. Little Heshang, who quietly stood up, saw everything in his eyes and had a more contact in his heart. She comforted the young girl's mother. As long as the young girl found peace of soul, she would recover her health. Although she refused to give up her mother, she still decided to leave first and leave her daughter in a quiet temple. The young girl was not familiar with the rules and sat directly under the eaves. On the stone statue under the eaves, Xiao Heshang saw that he hurried forward to persuade her to stop her. After the young girl left, she gently wiped the stone statue. Her respect for Buddha and her love for master and father surpassed her desire for the world. However, this was temporary. What should happen is destined to happen. Summer rain and water. There is a wild fun in Mianshan. The young girl sat in the rain, looking away. The cover of No One Appeared on the Distance is a proof that the young man's love has just begun. The young girl looked back and played with 2-in-1 smile. The green love flowed among the young people with the falling raindrops. As the love appeared together, there were still uncontrollable rest. It was occasionally broken. In the moment, the buttons on the buttons were stupid. The naked feet in the skirt are unprepared. The sleeping position is the hands that you want to touch under Bao Bei are hot and spicy chicken ears. It was the young girl who abused Qianyi's parents. The panic repentance was the master's father. Why did you pray? Love Jade was the young monk's question and shame. Pray. Ing was just a waste of self-deception. They rowed a boat together and walked through the forest. When they came to the familiar stream, the young girl looked at the little Jade in the water with curious eyes. On the small river, she looked at her perfect curves without turning around. Then she quietly climbed up the stone and secretly watched the next second. The water flowers exploded to death. The young girl screamed, "Come on!" As a result, the little Jade rolling skin was caught for her on the river. The hot skin with a slightly cool water bead. And the air began to warm up as the fingertips touched each other. When the little monk's hand slowly approached the young girl as if she had woken up in her dream, she pushed her back and fled. Unite, a man who was watching Liao and plucked the two of them. Xiao Monk was anxious and unable to bear it. The young girl said in anger that this was both panic and shameful and stupid. After that, Xiao Monk continued to collect medicine for the young girl every day. Gradually, he was full of heat and blood, and he had nowhere to ejaculate and guide the medicine. He was so annoyed that he could only die all the time. Rowing the boat desperately, I wanted to keep all my strength, but the girl sat beside her, still making people restless. The little monk Shang simply jumped into the water with the moon. She was not seen floating out of the water. The girl came to the side of the water and observed it. Unexpectedly, the little monk Shang suddenly jumped out of the water and suddenly walked up the queen into the water. The two of them were wet. However, the little monk Shang did not take her to change her clothes, but led her across the wall-less door to the mountains. The bright lights of the mandarin ducks washed the rain and the water. The two of them finally completed their marriage, So Xiao Mengsheng completely broke the rules. When the Buddha's heart returned to the temple, she had ghosts and even forgot to wait for the boat. Although the old monk had noticed it, she did not ask. After this, what the two of them did became increasingly absurd. Even in the late night, the little monk would have made an appointment with the old monk who was sleeping in a sleeping place, and he personally got into the young girl's bed. After that, he stopped obeying the rules of men and women and moved the stone statue from the door to the foot of the room, wiped it, and let the young girl sit on it. Some poets blew the hearts of the two men and swayed with it. What was amazing is that with the nourishment of love, the young girl's body actually became, as she got better day by day, her face gradually became red and she had a real smile in her eyes. Lao Mushang looked at the pair of young people laughing and fighting in front of her. I might have been confused in my heart, but I just kept silent. At that time, Xiao Musang had completely muddied the river of love and willingly offered everything. His madness and anger made him feel scared. Just imagine that the following separation from the young girl will fall into madness. Those passionate love words are like summer days with rising winds in the mountains. The delusions gradually become single, and the little monk wants to let everything stop forever at this moment. But unfortunately, the four seasons are turning, and summer will always pass. Whether it is the green true love or the naked desire, it is just the steaming water rise. And finally, Lao and Shang discovered their personal relationship. Mushang immediately knelt in front of the Buddha and cried to his master and father with tears in his mouth and asked for his forgiveness. In fact, Lao Heshen understood that love and desire are the common human feelings, and the resolving of the harmony is a big taboo. So he decided to send the young girl away. The young monk still cried and begged his master, but the old monk was still unmoved and even warned him seriously that once a person had the desire of a friend, he would definitely bring disaster to his body. Unfortunately, the little monk did not listen to the advice of his master. Not only did he take away the small statue of Buddha in the temple, it seemed to be showing that he still kept the Buddha Dharma in his heart. He never gave up the grace of his master and father. He also let the chicken return to the mountains. At that moment, his desire was completely released like a cock. Facing the departure of the land, the old monk did not persuade him, because he knew that this was a hurdle that was destined in the fate of the young monk. No one could say it 1,000 times to 10,000 times. It would be better to go to the red dust and roll away in the red dust. It was a blessing, a disaster, a fate, or a sin. After Xiao Monk left, the old monk was already like lived to the ground. When the door is slowly pushed open again, summer is over and autumn is coming. The red and yellow leaves are reflected on the water. As the last part of life is revealed, it is said that saving time must be smooth. Autumn is not only the season of harvest, but also the beginning of a mess. This day, Lao Heshang went out to the garden and came to the door with a cat that was being picked up by the cat. Before she arrived, she first carried the cat out and opened it. The honey paste wrapped in paper was just as she tasted the delicious food. On the paper, she saw the transparency of the land, which made her bear to kill her wife in the world. The woman who lost her life should be the former young lady, the old man, raised her head and looked at the sky. The wind bell hanging on the eaves sat down in the autumn wind. He silently put away the newspaper and found the clothes that his disciple had once been repaired. The fine needles were made. The record says that in the past 4 years, the broken time was also sewn. At the moment when he saw the newspaper, the old monk knew that his disciple was coming back. The little monk who had committed a serious crime had no way to escape. This temple in the mountains was his place, and his only little monk who was carrying his bag was climbing the mountains and crossing the ridge. The familiar road in my memory walked towards the temple. Compared to the time he left, his appearance had changed drastically. The eyes were filled with sharp objects, as if they were holding a trace that was difficult to vent. Soon he walked to the door. The wooden gate had been practicing for a long time, and even the once mighty and powerful door god swallowed his face. Zhao Heshang went with his master from a distance across the lake. His master rowed a boat to pick him up. With a gentle sentence, you will smooth out the wrinkles of time when you grow up. However, Xiao Heshang avoided the old Heshang's vision, and the leisurely boat lay across the endless lake. Everything changed, and nothing changed. The old man and Sheng hugged the cat and came to him. One by one, and one by one, sat by the lake again after several years. Old Heshang wanted to know his experience over the years, but Xiao Heshang did not buy it, and even felt unbearable. It turned out that he could not accept his love for his old wife, but he fell in love with someone else, so he killed his wife. At this moment, he does not look like a repentant murderer, but more like an angry victim. How could he yell at Lao Mushang? Lao Mushang comforted him that the world is like this and that nothing can be done. After all, other people will like what you like. But the little monk at that time did not listen to anything at all, and he was full of strangeness. I also returned the Buddha statue that I had taken away. It was ironic that there was a sword and knife stained with blood under the merciful Buddha statue. He held the knife and stabbed it hard to the ground and left several traces of shocking eyes on the wooden board. It was like a giant statue of hatred. The fear that came late at night wrapped around his heart. He stared in panic and could not sleep. Even in the quietest temple, his heart still could not be peaceful. He rode like anger and climbed through the boat and fell down. In the stream that once carried countless memories, they were astrayed and helpless as a child who was at a loss, shouting to Master Father, Master Father. Unfortunately, the river of life can only be used to suffer, and he decided to commit suicide. He wrote down the wall on paper, muddled his eyes, nose, and mouth, and then knelt in front of the Buddha. He wanted to die and seek life. However, he couldn't help but struggle. The old monk who heard the movement broke the door and got into anger. He still beat the young man up in a few seconds. Sometimes suicide was another way to escape and avoid punishment. Master and father saved Ho Xiaohe. The wounds that were still covered by the 5 flowers and were exposed to the red building after being cast on the beams of the 4 seedlings. In the extreme pain of flesh, the little monk's soul is reshaping and growing. The old man in the outside world used the cat's tail to write the Boroboro's secret heart on the cemetery floor of the front courtyard. The skeleton inside the house was pulled and burned, and the little monk was still silenced. He had a hot eye in his eyes, and he used the knife stained with blood to pick himself up. The love fell to the ground, and the past was broken. When his legs opened and his heart was a little surprised, his father told him that he would carve all the words with a knife, and then he would come out. Because every word is engraved, anger will be reduced by a little. When the autumn wind suddenly rose, the little monk knelt on the ground and scared his ruthlessness. Following the master and father, he depicted the Heart Sutra. Oh, in one stroke. The master and disciple were silent and silent. The disciples were a little quiet, but the police who pursued the fugitive appeared. The master took the 2 policemen in calmly. The moment he went ashore, the knife and gun broke out in confrontation. He ate the light reprimand of Lao Mu Shang and suddenly extinguished the smell of the gun. He scolded Xiao Mu Shang, "What are you doing? Continue to eat." Xiao Mu Shang only hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered his body, followed the master's instructions, and then Lao Mu Shang explained to the police with a leap-eyed eye that eating the heart can restore peace in his heart. Finally, they reached an agreement to let Xiao He leave the class again. The period is tomorrow morning. At the beginning, Xiao He will split up quickly because of the sound of gunfire from the police. He gathered all the bloodfish at the tip of the knife until late at night. The police next to the shell that was still filled with all his body was detained for him. The candle was still burning. The candle was still exposed. Xiao He finally finished the class. The last piece of clothing in the straight class fell to the ground and was lightly covered by the police. The sword that has gone from sin and evil finally gets stained with the blood of the murderer. Life and death, love and hatred of the murderer. The blood as the media was intertwined with each other. The extreme fatigue finally made Xiao He sleep peacefully. When he was sleeping well, Lao He applied the paint and was shocked by the sweetness with 2 policemen. Finally, Lao He woke up Xiao He. Xiao He opened his eyes and was shocked by the scenery in front of him. The redemption of the soul's soul was marked with a chorus in the bitter autumn wind. Xiao He followed the police with a calm face and went to prison to continue to atone for his sins. But strangely, no matter how the police draw it, the boat did not move until Xiao He turned around and looked at his master's father. After the old monk turned his head and said goodbye to him, the boat moved and gradually moved away. Looking at the oldest land that he had raised himself, Lao Monk was deeply moved. After the group left, the little cat also went up the shore and returned to the forest. The wall-less door of the mountain was automatically closed. Then the boat slowly returned, after he was under the attention of Lao Monk. After he sat alone in front of the door for a long time, his eyes gradually faded, and he was just on white paper. Write a few B characters on the top. Take off your pine robe that has been with you for many years. Then put wax candles on the skewers and cook cakes on firewood. Then he pulled out the boat school and sealed his 7 bridges with the same B-word paper. Finally, he sat on firewood and floated towards the center of the lake. The candles at the bottom of the boat lit the pile of firewood. The cold lake water poured into the boat. He burned his people to ashes with the fire. His disciples' sins made his master's father's decades of practice cause dust. He handed over his murderer's disciple and wanted to redeem his sins. After the old monk entered the throne, a little snake came out from the bottom of the boat, and one of them swam into the temple. This was the old monk's obsession. Everything should have risen and died, but he still couldn't let go of his ties to his disciples. These are his only 4 attempts. The 2 of them finally completed the closed ring of cause and effect. Autumn is the broken ring of cause and effect. The story of winter completely happened. In silence, the door was pushed open and the lake was unfolded. Thick ice layers. There was no trace of vitality in the mountains. There was no trace of vitality. The young man who had been imprisoned is now in middle age. He sat at the temple with his hands together and sat piously. At this time, the temple had been untreated for many years. It was already broken, and it was too bad to wait until he opened the temple door and watched the snake stayed from his master's father. The monk's robe left at this time. He already understood everything in his heart. Then he put on the monk's robe of his master, lit the white wax candle, and calmly came to the center of the lake, using a cone to create an ice surface. Then on the sea of burnt boats, he found the master's father's son. After that, he carved a statue of Buddha with ice and wrapped the sacred figure in red cloth and embedded the eyebrow of the statue. The flowing water in the ice boat constantly brushes the crystal-clear Buddha statues, especially pure, just like everything in this temple. After doing these things, he dug a hole in the ice surface in front of him, washed his face with cold water, and began his hard practice. And then, whenever he practiced great works, the Asiyai. Nike was silently accompanied her, and she continued her master's practice every day, kneeling down and worshipping Buddha and practicing Buddhism as if it was integrated with the heaven and earth. This unshocked calm seemed to be able to extend to the end of life, until one day, a masked woman's fate came to the temple. The wheel of fate was unintentionally restarted the woman's arms and hugging a young child in her arms. She was still unwilling to reveal her true face to the gentleman's respectful heart. She wanted to unveil her face and look at her. Clearly, her appearance was gently stopped by a woman. People in the world often have unspeakable crying places. She was strong and she stopped snatching the ball. The little snake who had been snatched all of this horn was seen until late at night. The woman untied her veil and finally looked at the child. Then she ran out all the way. She ran very anxiously so that she accidentally fell into the ice cave and died on the spot. It was the woman's choking sound that caused her to die. Wait until the next day. The child who could not find her mother's mother cried loudly. She seemed to feel her mother's call, and she wanted to climb the ice cave with difficulty. The monk who rushed over picked up the child, but saw the figure of the woman under the ice waiting to catch the woman up after she came. She curiously untied the woman's veil, and after burying the woman, she stood on her back and headed towards the top of the mountain just like she was when she was young. In the first spring, Xiao Monk was to atone for his sins. At this moment, she believed that the woman had just fallen into the ice cave where she fetched water, which made her lose her life. Her burden is to repay this person's life. She was no longer as passive as she was when she was a child, but instead took the initiative to step on this difficult road in her arms. An abandoned child, a mother with a bitter heart, a betrayed lover, a wife who lost her life, and a father who cares about her disciples. Time is hard. Who can retreat with all its might? The answer is 5. This time, he finally surpassed himself when he was young, climbed to the top of the mountain and stood on the top of the mountain, and only then did he truly understand that it was like a seedling in a lake, and the lake was just a little smaller in a larger mountain. The yellow-feathered frog and snake flashed one by one. In front of the eyes, humans thought they were high on the top and could play with the weaker and smaller creatures. Little do we know that in the face of a strong destiny, each of us is carrying a stone on our back and showing off the feathered frogs and snakes walking forward. He placed the Buddha statue on the top of the mountain and began to sit down by learning the Buddha statue. It was spring again at the end of winter, and he and his children had completely become the old and young monks of the past. Under the eaves, he raised the painting board to describe the appearance of the young monks, which was quiet and warm, but the ones that could be passed on were not worthy of beauty and ugly. On this day, Xiao Mushang came to that familiar little play. He used stones to torture frogs and snakes. Even the laughter of that age was like the first, and even his methods were even more cruel. He stuffed the lion into the mouths of animals without leaving any plan, but he didn't know the distance to the mountain behind. The Buddha statue is quietly watching everything. People in the world are suffering, and it is difficult for Buddha to save lives. The young monks will eventually have their own sins to repay. Spring is the burden of life and death. Summer is the thin outbreak of desire. Autumn is the cessation of cause and effect. Winter is the self-cultivation. And spring, summer, autumn, and winter are the cycle of the whole life. From entering the door of no robbery, all causes and effects begin again. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, spring, and spring. And Kim Ji Deok Seok. It was starred by Oh Young-soo and Kim Ji-deok-seok. It was released in 2003's drama film, with 4 seasons being directed. The greed, anger, arrogance, and doubt that summons human nature, from the nameless evil of eating and killing the spirit in childhood, to the pain of addicts of young people, and the pain of drowning desires to the violent regret after killing their wives in middle age, they finally come to the bitter practice and new life in winter. Every stage of winter is the wisdom of human nature and Buddha nature. It is not directly inherited, but to let the young people carry the stone and write the heart scriptures and bravely receive the same body to awaken the conscience. This kind of education hides true redemption, not external force. Punishment is another spring in the movie. The punishment is not a simple repetition, but a spiral upward wheel. When the little monk who grows up and becomes a heart once again stuffs the stone into the animal's mouth, what we see is not only the helplessness of fate, but also the incompleteness of practice. The director uses water to compete for the flow of desire, uses wall-free doors to compete for rules and freedom, and uses his tongue to reveal the conscience and awakening of desire. These phenomena connect a core proposition. Life is like 4 seasons, and each course is a lesson, and enlightenment requires a complete cycle. The most shocking scene in the movie is that the middle-aged monk climbs the mountain to atone for his sins with huge stones on his body. The stone is both the realization of sin and the magic tool for practicing. When he placing the Buddha statue on a stone, he implicitly used the Buddha nature to subdue the demons in his mind. And when the old man used the wall to stick to the 5 officials at the end of his life, it was the ultimate interpretation of the 6 closeness of the roots. Only by cutting off the adhesion of desires can one transcend the cause and effect. In reality, we are often trapped by various trends, anxiety in career, emotional obsession, and material greed. The movie tells us that true relief is not about escaping from the cycle of return, but about learning to balance picking up and letting go through energy. This film is not a religious film, but a mirror that shows all living beings. It uses fewer narratives to tell us that there is no eternal enlightenment in life. Only the work that is constantly facing is like the lonely door at the end of the film. The rules are free to enter the heart. If you are trapped in the winter of life, you might as well remember that the ice and snow will eventually melt, and the next spring is always worth looking forward to. Today's movie is shared here. Welcome everyone to like, comment, and repost. I am a shark. I am looking forward to meeting you next time.